Another week, another episode of Mr. Robot. I'm Daniel Montgomery. I'm here with David Buchanan and Tony Ruiz to talk about the latest episode titled In It 5. And this episode had, which is true of last week, I feel like the season might have turned a corner at this point. We are seeing forward story momentum in a real dramatic way in these last couple of episodes, which I'm really, really happy about. This was one of my favorite episodes of the season, in the top 3 or 4, below Alf, but above a lot of the other kind of early season navel-gazy kind of stuff. What did you guys think in general of the episode?
It was my favorite episode of the season, but without question. This felt as much like the show of Mr. Robot Season 1 that I loved, and also really took the whole Mr. Robot interaction between Mr. Robot and Elliot and added a new twist to it, with the fact that it's almost like things are happening that even Elliot is unprepared for, and things are happening that even Mr. Robot is unprepared for. I thought, even with the opening flashback that kind of explains the whole prison thing and why he was really there, I thought the way that they utilized Christian Slater in that scene was it was jarring, actually, when Elliot is on, via closed circuit making his guilty plea, and then all of a sudden just Christian Slater pops up on the screen. It took me aback, and I think this, we got new layers to Whiterose. We got, new layers with Angela. I really, really just found a lot to love about this episode.
We've lost David for a bit, but maybe more technical difficulties on his end. But hopefully he will come back in a minute. I did find what's interesting about this, the episode, in terms of the Elliot Mr. Robot dynamic, is that Elliot seems to not always be in control of his own mind, which we've known from the beginning, but this was the first time where it felt like Mr. Robot wasn't in control either. And that's interesting, because even when Elliot is in the driver's seat, even when Mr. Robot is frustrated or he's held back by Elliot in terms of what he wants to do and how he wants to do it, he's always aware. He's always cognizant of everything that's going on, everything that Elliot is deciding to do. This time it really feels like Mr. Robot really doesn't know what's going on inside that head at all times, and he's worried. And I'm worried if he's worried, because if there's something else going on in that brain that even he doesn't know about, then that's a serious cause for concern. But that did lead us to one sort of major twist. I guess it's more of a raising of a question than it is a twist. Is when Elliot asks to know what Phase 2 is, we find out that Phase 2 is Elliot's idea, of course, and he obviously doesn't remember what it is, and maybe that's Mr. Robot's doing, or maybe it's not. What did you think about that?
That shocked me, because I didn't expect the Dark Army contact to be the same guy that we saw rather graphically making his point to what's his name? I can't remember his name right now. Yes, Cisco. Didn't think we'd be seeing that character again, and kind of the look on his face when Elliot says, "What is stage 2?" and he's just completely confused. And then to have that moment come back with Darlene hearing that and realizing, oh my God, now Elliot's really not in control, and it puts them all in a really vulnerable position. I just thought that was a particularly ingenious way of taking this unreliability of Elliot that's really been a part of the whole season, and even bringing it to another level.
Yeah, it's and what surprised me more than seeing the Dark Army guy back again was actually seeing Cisco back again so quickly. Because welcome back, David. Just talking about the the Dark Army, the phase 2, stage 2 of this plan that apparently is Elliot's, and he doesn't even know it. And I was just going to say that I was surprised that Cisco, that he was back. I thought, last week we found out he's a traitor. He just got hit with the baseball bat. This week, not even any bruises. So apparently she doesn't swing that hard. But what did you think about that? The whole revelation of stage 2 being Elliot's idea, and he doesn't know it.
It was surprising to me. They keep catching me off guard with things that I feel in hindsight we should see coming. But the show just in general does a really great job of kind of concealing the technical details and the plot details, in some cases when they want to, behind layers of emotion and character development. So I didn't see that coming because I was so invested in this episode in Mr. Robot finally being out and the emotional struggle he's having of kind of finding himself frozen in moments and having, Christian Slater's Mr. Robot having to jump in for him, that it kind of successfully, for me, masked those plot developments. So I was caught by surprise.
Yeah, and then we got another sort of the opposite end of this whole conspiracy, which is Whiterose and whatever her plan is. It seems like that's getting a little big, and it's not quite at the level of Tyrell Wellick of all right, just tell us already. But it's starting to get there. We do have a little bit better sense of her dynamic with Philip Price, which is a little bit more master-slave than we would have imagined in terms of Philip Price being really kind of under Whiterose's thumb, and his predecessor apparently having been killed by Whiterose to get whatever it is exactly that she wants. What did you guys think of? I loved Michael Christopher in that scene where he stands up to Whiterose and he basically, I will take us both down before I let you take me down. What did you guys think of that scene?
I completely agree with you. It was also kind of one of the few times where we didn't see Whiterose in control of the situation. You could almost see that it kind of took her aback that she wasn't the one pulling the strings. And what was the phrase that Philip Price used? I will rain fire or something like that.
Chaos.
It rained chaos. Yeah, that was so brilliantly done. With the umbrellas and the outdoor space. That was just shot so beautifully. And lines like that, just from a dialogue standpoint, can easily be over the top and seem like something you'd see on Scandal, but it really just resonated. And I think a lot of the credit for that has to go to Michael Christopher, who, we finally remember a few episodes when he had that one scene where he was on the phone with somebody, and it was like a politician, and I remember asking during that recap, like, why is that scene there? Well, now we know why it's there. I'm not sure that we needed it to be, 3 episodes in between that first one and this one, but it gave him just an absolutely fantastic scene and gave us more B.D. Wong. I thought that scene in the cemetery was both comical and frightening at the same time. I loved it.
Yeah, I did too, and I think they're using B.D. Wong just enough, because I always, whenever I see his name in the credits, I get a little bit afraid that they'll use him too much, because one of the most important elements of the character is that mysterious air. We don't know everything about Whiterose, and I feel like the more that Whiterose is on screen in one given episode, some of that mysterious luster might wear off, but time and time again they use B.D. Wong and the character just enough, and this was another time when they've used it. Just 2 scenes, not really long, but really effective and impactful.
And then we've got another element of this episode was Angela, and this time she went from being kind of the world's worst infiltrator into sort of being the world's worst spy. Although she actually gets it done. She was trying to get these documents and information, and so every time someone passes by her computer or passes by her, she does this thing where she looks up and she to look as guilty as anyone in that situation. Even when she's in her own office, I'm thinking, you are in your own office. Do not look shifty in your own office. That's not helping you. But she did manage to get a lot of information and a lot of documentation, and she brought it to the nuclear board or something in Washington, I believe. And but it did seem like there were some if she's really bad at being sneaky, then that woman at that was really bad at being ingratiating, because she had this "we'll take care of you" kind of "we are going to assassinate you in the next room" look for the whole trip down that hallway. She could have worked on her bedside manner a little bit if she really wanted to get Angela to give up everything she had. What did you guys think about Angela this week? And is she becoming a little bit clearer as she's now apparently trying to do the whistleblower thing against Evil Corp?
I'm a little concerned about what you're talking about, Daniel, because it does start to feel, and I don't remember how many weeks ago it was, but you were saying as the conspiracy gets bigger and bigger, it starts to get out of control. And this had an element of, okay, so now even this government Department of Nuclear and Parks or whatever it was is kind of maybe bought by somebody, and they're not doing a good job of covering it up, and it felt like the conspiracy is growing. Although I'm kind of thinking about it too, I was kind of thinking, despite how it was played, are we seeing it as Angela being extremely paranoid and thinking about her actions rather than somebody being just so overtly, ridiculously bad at covering up their intentions? So I'm not sure. I'm a little bit worried about where that's going, but it's really interesting because we saw a lot of new pieces about this particular plant in many scenes this week, and I thought that connective thread with Angela kind of showing us this first time about it and getting the documents and then hearing it from Whiterose was a nice thread for the week.
Yeah, and the fact that it led up to this, it's been kind of a recurring theme with Angela this whole season of the one step forward, 2 steps back. But it also led to what I thought was a really effective scene. And speaking about how they're using B.D. Wong effectively, I think they're using Grace Gummer really effectively.
Yeah.
Just that one scene that she had so many layers to it, and with both kind of this, she managed to play both this kind of like, no, I am law enforcement and I have your number. To also saying, look, this isn't you. This isn't who you are, but I am your only chance of getting out of this alive, or, whatever, the many layers that she was implying. And I thought I loved the line where she said, the next person that knocks on your door probably isn't going to bring you food. I thought it was a wonderfully written scene, especially played against that kind of stark, pristine, very sterilized E-Corp housing that Angela's living in. And I love how they've used Grace Gummer. She continues to add more interesting layers to a character that could easily been played as a detective on the case, and really giving her more interesting things to do.
I really kind of feel bad for Angela in that scene in particular, because if I'm her, like, knowing what she knows, knowing what little she knows about all the other goings-on, I wouldn't trust her. I wouldn't trust Dom any more than I would trust that woman at the Nuclear Commission. Because that seems, because she's basically doing the same thing. Hey, I'm trying to help you. And so I know from having seen Dom in other scenes and other storylines, I feel she's more or less trustworthy compared to, say, this mystery woman who's walking her off down a mystery hallway. But from her perspective, she's like, well, I have no more reason to trust you than this person or anyone else I meet. So if I were Angela, I feel like, she, with the hacking thing, it's sort of in for a penny, in for a pound. If I were her, I would have taken this data, found a way to, get it to Elliot, get it to Darlene, get it to the people she knows, and she knows, even if she doesn't know everything they're up to, she knows that they're not out to get her specifically, and they won't be trying to ruin her in however they go about things, and that they want to take down Evil Corp. So if I were her, yeah, I would have gone straight to get it to the hackers, ring the hackers.
Well, and that also kind of leads to what I thought was another great thing about this episode was the way that the tension was building at just the right points. Because at first when Cisco has to go back to the house to retrieve that tape, which seems really odd that there'd be a tape left behind there, and he goes back and then he sees something, and that balanced with then after Darlene realizes that Elliot is the one that's behind stage 2, and then with the knocks at the door and who's at the door. And I just found the pacing of this episode so good, even though this was, again, another, hour and 13-minute episode with commercials, of course. But I felt like this episode was much tighter and had a much stronger flow to it. It didn't feel nearly as long as some of the other episodes, particularly in the first half of the season. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that the tension was forward momentum. This episode moved, and it did not lag one bit.
Yeah, exactly. I actually thought, because Daniel, to your point earlier about Cisco kind of being full strength this week after how last week ended, I almost thought that Darlene might be setting him up to go back there and something bad happening to him, because it's very uncharacteristic of them to leave something behind or leave their tracks and then he just volunteers to go. And I was like, okay, he's got it. She's got it in for him now. She's setting him up to go back to that house, and something bad's going to happen. And something is there, but I don't get the impression anymore that Darlene is behind it at all. He just walked in on something that he shouldn't have seen.
I couldn't tell what those sounds were. I mean, were they? I mean, at first I thought it was like, are these people having sex, or is this just somebody randomly grunting? Maybe that's where Tyrell Wellick. Maybe it's Wellick. Who knows? I'm just gonna have that opinion every week until he shows up. Maybe it was Wellick. Maybe it was Alf.
It's his random grunting haven that he just goes to. Yeah, that was strange. I mean, if it weren't for the sound, I'd think, okay, Cisco has clearly found the bodies of, other members of the team, and, because we know that they're missing, and that, the Dark Army has it out for them, and so potentially, if it's even the Dark Army that's killing them off, which I don't even think is entirely confirmed even. But yeah, so the grunting makes that a little weirder, and it makes who's at Darlene's door weirder. Now I couldn't quite place the settings. I sort of lost track a little bit. When Mr. Robot, when Elliot goes back to his apartment and sees Mrs. Wellick outside in the car. That's not where Darlene is it?
No, she's in Cisco's apartment.
Gotcha. I just wanted to make sure, because that maybe Tyrell Wellick was at the door or something, which could still be true. It could
still be true.
Yeah.
But it's just like Tony said. It's as plausible that it's Wellick as it is that it's Alf at this point. So, and I'm not sure which I would enjoy more, to be honest. But yeah,
maybe it's Alan Thicke.
just bringing back more of the more
80s.
But Mrs. Wellick coming up in that car at the end of the episode, it does indicate the convergence of another mystery point of these kind of growing and expanding conspiracy threads that maybe are starting to come together, where maybe whatever Lady McWellick has been trying to cover up for this entire season, which we don't even really have a clear sense of, maybe that's part of Phase 2 somehow. What did you guys think of her return, and what do you think it can't bode well because nothing about her ever really does. So, where do you think? Where did you think that was going?
David,
ahead,
you
Tony.
take this one.
No. I was going to throw it to you. I don't really know what to say. The only thing that it was useful, but then not. And her calling him, or him giving her his name as Ollie, you knew that they were setting up another encounter in this episode of some kind because they felt they had to remind viewers of it. So I wasn't necessarily surprised that it was her, but I have no idea of what to make of them coming face to face again at all.
Yeah, it's interesting how even the recaps at the very beginning, the previously on Mr. Robot, it seems like that's where they're going to answer a lot of the questions because, we find out why Elliot was in prison. Granted, I don't think any of us expected that he was going to plead guilty to all those charges. The fact that whole thing with the dog in season 1 and his psychiatrist's, philandering boyfriend, that was going to come back. And we get the answers to Ray, the fact that Ray was the warden at the prison, which answers so many questions. But still, the whole Lady McWellick thing, they are coming to an end game. And, this is where all the pieces are going to start coming back together. I mean, we only have 2 more weeks. 3 episodes, but 2 weeks. So, because there's a 2-hour finale. I don't know where they're going to go with Lady McWellick. The preview teaser, and boy did they do a good job of making that teaser vague. That teaser answered 0 questions. The only one really concerning line in that whole thing was when Lady McWellick says to Elliot, "Do you really want to say no to me?" I was like, "Ooh, okay." We're going to get some juicy Lady McWellishness.
Yeah, vague previews. I actually like those. I prefer
those.
But it sort of reminds me of how I think Mad Men perfected those, where they would show scenes from next week's episodes, and it's literally just clips of actors saying completely random lines of dialogue. It's like someone walks in a door and like Don Draper says, "May I help you?" in like a, and they cut to more of that. That was always the best way of doing the we'll tell you something but not anything at all really kind of teasers. They should try that on Mr. Robot, where it's just Elliot turning to the camera and going, "What?" Because that seems to be his speed a lot of the times, especially now that his brain is fracturing a little bit more than usual. Now, what's interesting about these last 2 episodes being as strong as they have been and being as having as much propulsive story and attention to them is that this feels like now I feel an 8 to 10 episode season. It wanted to be an 8 to 10 episode season. That's kind of expanded before. Like this is what it looks like before it was someone edited it. Do you guys think that with these episodes and the kind of dramatic tension that we're getting from it finally, that if the run-up had gotten here a little bit faster in a little bit a tighter way, there would have been less sophomore slump discussion?
Yeah,
absolutely. I totally think so. The fact that we're at this point, because and we don't want to leave people with the idea that the first half of the season was not without merit. I mean, there were certainly moments, and in a few cases, entire stretches of those first 5 episodes that were among some of my favorite moments of the season. But really, it's found its narrative and its structural strength going into these last 3, going in, with the 3 weeks previous to this, and then leading up into the last 3, and it certainly can benefit a series. The fact that it's really hitting its peak right now says that maybe going back to 10 episodes would be the optimal way to tell the story. What do you think, David?
I don't know if it's the episode count so much as just going back to what you said earlier, Tony, just the fact that the longer episodes have a lot less tension in them because they feel like they're meandering. If we got 2 more episodes that maintain this type of pacing and excitement and just further the plot even more, then I would be okay with a longer season. I think it's when the episodes are longer and they go for something that's maybe a little bit more auteur and not just focused on telling the story and driving the plot is where we're seeing maybe some of the down points in the season. But I agree also that I particularly liked the first half of the season too. I was never really disappointed with the season, and some of the moments, like you said, are amongst my favorite, especially the flashbacks. Some of the flashbacks they gave us and the origin stories that they gave us in the first half of the season were tremendous.
Yeah, I think a lot of what I think it's less that the first half of the season was bad, and more that the build up to a lot of these storylines and mysteries have just gone on a little bit long, and yet now we're getting payoffs to some of them. I feel like by the end of the season, hopefully, if it continues on this upward trajectory, the whole second season is going to look better in hindsight than it did in progress. Because everything, the picture is going to become complete. We're not just going to be looking at one corner of a painting and going like, what's that supposed to be? So I'm putting my faith in the show and that it will pay off as well as it did in season 1, or at least in such a way that this journey will have been leading there, and I will feel that now it makes sense, which I hope. One other thing from this episode that was really interesting was we actually got to see Elliot's mother. I almost forgot about this scene because it is a scene, and I'm not sure it told us much about. She seemed to be rather catatonic. Whether she really was, or what her condition is, or why her condition is kind of left up in the air, which is par for the course. What did you guys think of that revelation, if you can call it that?
One of the thing that struck me was, and to me it actually gave me more questions than answers, but they were questions that I liked. Was when Elliot goes in there and he basically looks at his mother and says, if it wasn't for you, you helped me get through these last few months. And I was like, really? How? So I have a feeling that maybe by the end of this season we'll get a more complete picture of the mother. I've always found the mother to be just a fascinating character, because what we've seen of her, and I love the fact that they've almost parsed her out in just little bits here and there. We've seen her basically only we've seen her as just somebody sitting in a chair in the background. We've seen her as the kind of the angry, domineering, borderline abusive woman, and then we saw, her happy. No, she was still abusive even in the 80s flashback.
Particularly abusive in the 80s flashback.
Particularly abusive, but funny abusive. Funny abusive, if there is such a thing. But I feel like there's that added piece to the puzzle, and particularly it struck me as interesting that scene kind of preceded the Mr. Robot Elliot, the haywire in the connection between the two of them, and I thought, I wonder if there's something. Of course, everything on the show makes me go, I wonder if there's something to that.
I also thought it was that scene remarkable in the way that, is it the most genuine that we've seen Elliot be with someone? Like for somebody with such a damaged relationship, or what we can tell is not an ideal relationship with a parent, it seemed to be a real act of kindness on him for somebody who really is always emotionally distant, to actually want to go visit and just see how she is and thank her for even subconsciously help him endure prison while Darlene won't even go in the room. It seemed like a really genuine moment from Elliot that we don't typically get to see.
And the fact, this was another lovely touch in this episode. I thought that one of the things that Sam Esmail does really well as a director is he knows how to make even the smallest moment pop. I thought the opening scene of Elliot coming out of prison and Darlene pulling a Bill Murray in Lost in Translation and whispering something to him that we can't hear, and then hugging him, and he hesitates hugging her, as he usually does because he doesn't like to be touched. But then the way he kind of squeezed her, I thought that just that small piece had so much emotion to it. And then the other one that I really, really was caught off guard by was, again, how they use Christian Slater in this, of Christian Slater just all of a sudden appearing lounging with Darlene on the couch and them just kind of looking at each other. I just thought that was so, it was touching and confusing at the same time. It's those little bits that make this, not an ordinary show. That makes it's the difference between it being a good show and being a good episode and being a great episode. Is those little bits, I think.
Yeah, especially since we, as an audience, should know exactly what's happening when we see Christian Slater, but the fact that it still remains in some part disorienting really speaks to just how well it's done when it's executed, that we still kind of are taken off guard or surprised by how they're using him.
I was just thinking that it's touching but confusing at the same time should be on the DVD. It's the tagline when the whole season comes out. It feels like it sums it up pretty well. So, well, final thoughts from either of you. Any further thoughts for the rest of the season? Do you continue to be optimistic, or anything else that we haven't addressed that you sort of want resolved, or anything like that?
I'm really looking forward to seeing how the Lady McWellick dynamic comes into play. Where's Terrell? I've said it every week so far, and I'm going to keep saying it. I think maybe we'll get an answer next week, but I thought that last week. But even though I didn't get him this week, I'm really, really encouraged by where the season is going, and I will have more faith in Mr. Esmail because he's earned it back from me, at least.
Yeah, for me, I don't know if you guys talked about it earlier when I dropped momentarily, but I just love the whole opening of the episode, seeing what happened to Elliot and going into prison and how he got there, and especially how they answered what we thought was a really big lingering question of who's on the other side of Elliot's door. They answered it so casually, and then they used the same device again at the end of the episode with Darlene when we know we're not going to see who's on the other side of that door this week. I just thought the parallels were really nicely done. But yeah, Tony, I agree also, really optimistic about the rest of the season, and I think they can pull off the plot, pull off executing what they wanted to in a satisfying way in the last 3 hours of the season.
So with that, I want to thank you, everyone, for watching, and we'll join you again next week to talk about the penultimate episode of the season, sort of. It's technically 2 episodes from now, which I suspect will just be another kind of 90 minutes with limited commercial interruption, which is what they did with week 1. That'll be my one prediction for this show, because I can't predict what's actually going to happen on it. I can at least predict how long it will be from week to week. So with that, thank you very much, and we will see you next week.